Hello and welcome to Heather and Hops. My name is Kat and I'm a knitter based in Hertfordshire in the United Kingdom. This has been my little space on the internet where I have documented my knitting journey from day one through to now while connecting with other makers and knitters across the world. And today, as you might have guessed from the title, is a very good example of being able to connect with other knitters. Today I am going to share with you a little chat I had with the lovely Loretta, who is an economist, a lifelong knitter and now author. I think she's released books before, but this one really pulled on my heartstrings since it's called The Power of Knitting. The book touches on knitting throughout, and whether you're a knitter or not, it's a fascinating book and a very nice read. It's knitting through history, through politics, through science, and how it is really such a powerful metaphor for life. I had a really nice chat with Loretta and I hope you enjoy it. I'm going to leave it there because it's quite a long little chat we had, and I hope to see you again very, very soon. Oh, lovely.
Yeah, this is better. Weird. I mean, you're in London, right? I don't know if it's warm, cold.
I'm hot and cold. I keep.
So am I. The moment is one thing. Anyway, okay, so shall I start? Oh, the video, sorry. Let me see it.
Yeah.
Video. Ready?
Perfect.
Wow. Okay.
Hello, and thank you for taking the time to have a little chat.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
I guess I'm going to start just by a little story. So your book, to me, came at exactly the right time. So I've had quite a journey, and I won't, open my heart too much. Not that I don't want to, but I've not shared too much about my journey of illness. And illness is what brought me here to knitting. And that's, it's totally fine. But through that, I've got to a point where I'm now, this is kind of what I do full time, which is amazing. And taking something negative and making it positive through knitting. And I'm yet to share it. And actually, hopefully, the episode that I'll release after this one will go into more detail about my bigger picture project.
Okay.
But that bigger picture project included researching the history of knitting. And for me, it was profound how much the history affected me emotionally. And it was something that I was noticing as I was knitting over the last few years. And one of my lovely friends, while I was away, again, because of knitting, I was playing with mohair goats, which is the best thing I could possibly do. And my friend sent me a link. Hi, Angie, if you're here. She runs a podcast and a yarn dyeing company too, and said, hey, I know what you're doing. Have you heard of this lovely book? And I was kind of surprised that I hadn't, given my research, but it came at just the right time, and I was able to, on the day of release, get hold of it on Audible.
All right.
Listen to it straight away. And then, through the power of knitting and connection, we're here together today through that, which is...
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Beautiful story. Yeah. But I'm glad that you found in this book the echo of your own story. Because, that was the idea of the book, was very much to reach out to people that are in similar situation that I was, and explain how knitting goes well beyond what we think it's a simple craft. It's actually extremely, extremely therapeutical. At least it was for me anyway. It literally saved my life. So that's the message really of the book.
I think for me, and I don't think I've really spoken to that about this on this platform either, but it saved my relationship after I literally broke down to a point where I've never been in a place like that, and I've really think having this craft will support me enough to not allow me back to that place almost. If I need to go there, obviously life happens, but you know, even the community, like the reason that I started a podcast, videocast, was the lack of connection through not being able to work.
Yeah.
You know, it's completely gone, and being able to reach out to a community and have a purpose, because it, you know, knitting does, whether you're knitting for yourself or for a loved one, it is, you suddenly have a purpose even if you're unable to get out.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's amazing. It's really,
it's difficult for people who do not knit to actually understand, grasp this healing power of knitting. Um, it's interesting, I think, that people, if you say, oh, yoga, everybody will say, oh, yes, you know, absolutely, meditation, all this stuff. But if we backtrack 30 years ago, it was the same thing of knitting today. Because, I mean, people, 30 years ago, if you had gone to somebody and said, oh, you know, you have to do yoga and meditation in order to relax, people will look at you and say, what? I mean, the yoga revolution is something that in the West took place 30 years ago. So this is why I'm fairly optimistic about knitting. I can see it also now that I got to know several knitters around the world. I can see how the knitting is helping people in different circumstances, I mean, psychologically. And it's amazing. I think it's absolutely amazing. So I can now say that what I wrote, based upon myself and what I read about people in my same circumstances, has been tested by my personal experience since the book has come out, which is almost a year, because it came out in Sweden last November.
wow.
Yeah.
Wow. It's, yeah, like, so again, my background, so I was a yoga, I taught yoga, and through that process of being able to talk and, you know, connection and healing, I was working in support work. So I didn't, one of the girls that I worked alongside was like, oh, knitting. And at the time I wanted to, but I was very aware that in the past, and I read it and I clearly didn't understand the language, and that was, you know, probably a patience problem back in the day. But I was like, now 2 years on, I'm like, we really should have built that connection and built that.
Yeah.
But I'm now really able to, you know, if you can't for any reason practice on a yoga mat the positions, or you're not comfortable in the spiritual side, knitting really covers all of those bases in a way that I could not. And it's hard to articulate, but you have in your neuroscience chapter.
Thank you. Yeah, the neuroscience chapter. I mean, I thought, oh my gosh, this is incredible. It's I never thought that there were so many applications in science of knitting. I also didn't know that there was this universe of people doing that. But now I can understand. You know, for example, I'm an economist, and because, you know, I got so much into knitting, I mean, into the actual mechanics and rituals almost of knitting, and at the same time, you know, the technicalities of knitting. I was reading a book about economics, and then all of a sudden, you know, came to my mind, how can I explained this kind of concept coming from this book of economics, about, you know, the budget deficit, for example, you know, using knitting. It just came like that, you know, and I thought, wow, it's incredible. I mean, because I didn't talk about economics really in the book so much. It was mostly science, but even to explain what is the budget deficit? Why is the budget deficit not such a big deal at the moment? Why can we still print money in order to battle the pandemic? So all of these things actually can be explained through knitting, which I thought maybe I should write an article about that. So it is a craft that almost encompasses everything that that we're doing. And it's fascinating to discover that. It's absolutely fascinating. And maybe this is why it's been with us from the beginning. I mean, it's the first craft, really, because, I mean, with the fishing nets, the Paleolithic time, people needed those nets in order to fish, in order to feed themselves. So maybe that's why, but it's amazing.
It is. I've often, even now, find myself using knitting for anecdotes or metaphors to, support someone when they need a hand or when they're trying to explain something. And it's not just a way to break it down even simply for them, but actually for myself, because I've transferred it into something so meditative and just integral to now how I move through life.
Yeah.
That I understand it better and I can then react better because of it, I think. And that's how I feel anyway.
Yeah. Did you knit when you were a child, or?
So I actually just dug out the teddy bear, but he doesn't have his scarf. But when I was 8 years old, my grandmother did teach me.
Oh, okay.
And all I did was a square, rectangular garter stitch scarf, and that's where it ended. And I'm like, oh, that's a shame. But I think it's come at exactly the right times. And I think, that for me, even commuting on a train, I did 6 years of commuting in and out of London without knitting. And then the year that I did with it, I was like,
wow, that's great.
Yeah. I was like, how have I, because you can really feel it, the calmness, the fact you've got something to focus on that isn't a screen, and it does bring connections. That journey I did so many times.
Yeah.
Sitting on a train, no one's smiling at each other, but it was, 100,000% more frequently someone would say, hey, what are you doing? Or, oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
And I've actually made a couple of friends that are, probably lifelong friends from just having knitting sat on my lap.
Right.
I think that's quite powerful, isn't it?
Oh, yes, I think it's very powerful. And then there's another thing which I thought about is that, you see, for example, I find difficult to follow patterns. I mean, I do. I'm not saying I don't, but I really need to look. I mean, I have it in the book, The Language of Knitting, how you can actually look at something that people are wearing and then think about, how do they do it? I mean, how can I reproduce? What can I do? And all stuff. And the part of the plotting, it's a bit like writing books. I write books, so that's what I know how to do. But the putting together the proposal, the plotting of the story, the chapters and everything. And then once you have it there, you start the execution, which is writing a book. Well, it's the same thing about knitting for me, because the pattern to a certain extent is just the picture for me. I really need to do it by myself in order to see how big the back has to be, when do I have to start decreasing for the shoulders and all that. And I found it so rewarding and also incredibly creative, because then you can change it, put your own input into that, but also you can do something completely different from what you started. So I mean, I do the analogy with writing books because this is what I'm doing, but I guess it's true also for people that build houses, interior designers, people that build roads. I mean, it's just that from an idea all of a sudden, you prepare everything and then you execute, and then something beautiful actually takes place.
It is wonderful. I've learned a lot about I've actually started quite quickly going from knitting people's patterns to trying my own thing. And I figured that it's because not only do I love creativity, I love problem solving, and knitting really gives you a lot. But then learning that process of, having an idea, how do I execute it, what yarn, like picking that and then writing it, tech editing it, testing it, like that process is now so much more streamlined that I can apply it to other things. And if there's another project I want to do, like my bigger picture project, I've got a better way of setting that out purely from learning this craft, which I think again is fascinating, isn't it? That purely a craft that is a useful craft has taught, project management almost.
Yes.
Which is which is not something I would, not that I wouldn't find it interesting, but it's not something I'd set out to study. But it's just another wonderful repercussion of learning this craft.
Well, I wonder if these business schools and they should really use knitting as a way of problem solving, as you were saying, because I mean, you lost a stitch and you realize, 5 rows after, what are you going to do? And then you have to reconstruct it, you have to carry it out, but also strategies. So you want to do a jumper, you want to do a scarf or whatever, how do you judge, how much wool do you need, which kind of tension do you use to knit? I mean, there is a lot that needs to be thought, taken into consideration, put into an equation, and then produce. And the other thing is patience, meaning you cannot rush it. I mean, this is something that takes time. It's like painting in oil, that you have to go over and over to get the right thing, and then you cannot produce it in a short time. So during this period, you think, you consider what you're doing. You may want to improve it. You may want to redo certain parts. I mean, I think it would be extremely useful in a world where everything has to be quick. And actually now with this pandemics, all of a sudden life has slowed down, and we should really look at the positive side of this, of slowing down, because often, especially at business level, decisions that are taken too quickly without the right consideration, without reflecting upon that, produce major disasters.
It's very true. I think almost anyone that wishes to should be given the opportunity to learn the craft because of that, and this time especially. And actually, I think so. I have a knitting group, like a Discord. So it looks a bit like a Facebook Messenger or something, but we have different threads, and there's 100 people in there. And a lot of people have come back to knitting because of this situation we're in, which I think is fascinating. But then instantly it's brought them together. So the thing that they were lacking has already, been improved. I think it's wonderful. And the element of connection through knitting is profound, but the time we've got now to slow down, this is I hope, without going too off topic, I just really hope that we can make big enough changes. And I do think the craft of knitting and just the craft world as it is has got the power to do so if you know, they continue with yarn bombing and continue with sharing and connecting. And like last night I was talking to, there were 6 of us online, and there was not a single person in England that and I thought that is, I'm not, you know, I'm not, and as you've seen, I'm not the best with technology, but the combination of knitting and technology really is, it's so cool. I'm in awe.
Yeah, that's the other thing I came across in my research is the network. Huge, absolutely huge. And technology has made it possible to grow so much because, I mean, yeah, there were the knitting groups. I mean, in fact, you know, talk about the pioneers that, you know, really, really tough day working. They sat around the fire, knitting and exchanging. Of course, you imagine these women could not even talk to each other because, you know, they came from different countries. But through the knitting, through those stitches, through what they were doing, they actually managed to communicate. But today, because of technology, we have gone global. I mean, you can talk to somebody in Australia. You can get a pattern from New Zealand. And then if you have a problem, you get stuck, you can talk to the person who actually produced it in New Zealand. So, and this is something that surprised me initially when I start looking at writing this book, because I didn't have this, for me, knitting has always been part of my life. And so it's always been linked to my life wherever it was. I mean, I have friends with whom I've knitted all over the world, but in person, so never, yes. So that, but when I realized the networks, I also realized that this is much bigger than any other network. I mean, Facebook is considered to be the network, but actually, I think the knitting network is bigger. When if you add it all up, and yet it's in the quiet. I mean, nobody knows. It's not. Nobody tries to advertise. I was thinking about. Imagine how clever this network has been. That you exist, but nobody really knows you exist. So they don't come and bug you with all the ads. Nobody's trying to make money out of it. It's really a true manifestation of human ingenuity and connection. And I thought this was fantastic. I thought that this was one of the, I would say, the most important elements of knitting today.
Yeah, it is. And it's, I guess, I feel like a lot of things, this applies to it, unless someone has a reason to, or is encouraged to learn about something or question something, because it's not what we do now. We don't question things. That is what it is. If someone's knitting, you don't say, what are you doing? You just, that's what they're doing. But knitting is so open and people want to, that as soon as someone says, or even smiles at you, you're like, I'm knitting. And it is, I just wish, and I think through your book, hopefully more people will ask that question, like why and how, and build the community even more strongly, because it's like feels like a subculture that it's so profoundly known about. You know, everyone knows knitting is something that you can do, but until you find your, you know, little pocket and slide into it, you don't realize quite.
Yes,
it's a bit like the mushroom network underground, or trees. It's just, you accept it's there, but you're not really aware of how, you know, prolific it is. And it is like, I find it absolutely fascinating. This connection.
When I told my agent she was, she was, wow. You know, I said, well, that's how it is, because people do not expect, even knitters do not expect it. I mean, you have to be tapped into it. And then even if you're tapped into it, you only know that section of it.
Yeah, that's really true.
Yeah, it's. I mean, when I went, I went around the world in July.
Oh, wow.
And 19. I guess, I did the last trip around the world before the lockdown. In fact, I got stuck at the end of my trip. But I went to all the countries apart from Mongolia, where I really wanted to go and look at yarn and see patterns. Countries with a very strong tradition in knitting, and I look for the local yarn. So it was super interesting. It was really super interesting, and it was healing. And that was my way of heal through that terrible experience that I had. And little by little, as I moved around the world, I was accumulating more and more wool. And I had 2 suitcases, one for winter, one for summer, because I had no home. I was homeless basically that year. And because I was crossing the equator, I needed 2 suitcases. And then at a certain point, I got to Singapore, that I realized, I had a 3rd suitcase full of wool. So my friend said, okay, leave one of the suitcases, we'll take it to Rome for you. And they did. But it was interesting that, I had so much wool. And now I'm knitting through that wool. But going to yarn shops was also meeting people of the network, because of all these yarn shop owners and knitting groups. They were part basically of a network. And this is when I really had the clear idea of the dimension of this. Absolutely huge.
Yeah, each shop, even if they're not on the internet and technology space, they are another strip. And because I haven't mentioned, it is accessible and not it's a very gentle read. You've taken a lot of information and made it
simple.
Very simple and clear. There was not a lot of having to read between lines to pick out information. It was just very much there, which, as someone that suffers with a bit of brain fog due to my illness, was really nice. Actually, it was.
Oh, I'm so glad.
It was lovely.
So glad that it was good for you. Yes, thank you.
I could definitely have been 3 times as long, and I would have enjoyed it equally for sure. But
wow. Well, anytime you want, I'll tell you more stories. So many. The book could not have been an encyclopedia, but there's so much more.
And you can, I guess, even the size of the knitting network is almost impossible to.
Yeah, exactly. So you have to put it together so that people can read it, enjoy, and then if they want to research more, it's out there. Yes.
It was amazing, and to be listening to it while I was, on a knitting journey.
Yes.
It was even more special. It was really good. I thought I did have a couple of questions.
Yeah.
I can't. I was actually going to ask you how your journey was while you were away, but you have kind of.
I just tell.
Yeah.
It was beautiful. It was really. As I moved from one country to another with all this wool, I got better and better. It was very therapeutical. Knitting. Knitting was the thread basically. I went around because to certain places because of knitting. So it was a knitting tour of the world. But in personal very personalized, meaning I didn't go to meetings or things like that. I actually did it by myself. And it was also very much exploring, like, going to a city. I remember, I was in Melbourne at a certain point, and I thought, well, let me check out the knitting shop. So I went online and I got this knitting shop, and then I spent like 2 days going from one shop to the next. It was so people, will go and see monuments, people go and see beaches, or people go whatever. I actually went to knitting shops.
Melbourne's, I'm not a very well-travelled person, but I am grateful to say that I've been to both Australia and India. But Melbourne, in hindsight, I'm like, now you've said it, I'm like, oh yeah, there was knitting there and I didn't see it.
There's a lot of knitting in Melbourne, yeah.
Oh, I did see some of the little penguins, though. That was very.
Oh yeah, the penguins. Yeah. Sure. Yeah.
Was there anywhere in particular that stood out while you're away? Or is it all just particularly special for different reasons? Because I know that sometimes for me I couldn't pick, but.
Well, Norway was. I went to this shop with a friend. She took me to the shop, and it was wow. It was going into Aladdin's cave. There were enormous wall with all this wool, different colors, different shapes. Oh wow! And then they had all this pattern sample of Norwegian traditional knitting. It was. That shop was just something, I must say. So she took me there because, of course, she's from Oslo, and she knew she's a knitter, so she knew where to go.
China. Oslo's the only other place that I've managed to get to for a knitting festival.
All right.
But we only managed to get into one because the rest was shut because of the festival.
Oh, because of
Yeah, I don't know whether they were or just that by the time we'd finished work for the day. But we were like, oh. But we did have a few of them just outside, and I don't know whether it's because to me it seems a lot more of a traditional style, just like Shetland to me. And that's purely because I haven't done enough research. But I feel like Norwegian knitting in particular just holds a dear place in my heart for that. It feels like Selby mittens, and actually one of the first things I knitted was a Selby mitten because it's just gorgeous. Which in hindsight was a little bit wild, but I think that's how I've been able to progress so quickly, is lack of knowledge meant lack of fear. And that's something that I wish to impart, and not the lack of knowledge, but there's no need to have fear with knitting. Just start again.
Yeah, start again. Yeah.
You're not as committed. Not like sewing where once you've cut.
Yeah, once you cut, you cut. Yeah. No. Knitting is very forgiving. Yes.
Very, very forgiving. And there's almost always something you can do to.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Even if it's just start again.
Well, it's like life. Life should be like that. Nothing apart from death, of course. Nothing. Everything can be in reverse apart from that. Yeah. That's such a good metaphor of life.
It's really true. Have you? So I guess because we've spoken about it, I haven't really spoken much about lockdown, really, and how.
Yeah.
How have you found that, and have you found knitting to? Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised if you found knitting to be something that's helped guide you through.
Yeah, I mean, I was in lockdown in Montana by myself. So it was not too bad because I could go cross-country skiing with a friend every day for like an hour or 2 hours. So there was that distraction, let's say. And then I did knit a lot. And as I was knitting all these different things, my son's girlfriend, they were living in another house in the woods, actually, because they were afraid to pass on the COVID and, you know, whatever. So they were protecting me. So they were living there with other two people. And she was always cold because, I mean, it was cold. So as I was knitting these things, she would come over and bring the food and then see me wearing something new. And she would say, oh my gosh, she's so nice. And then my son would say, Mom, you know, she's always so cold, you know, could you give it to her? So as I was knitting all this stuff and giving it to her, yeah, and then at a certain point I said, okay, this is mine. This is so in the end, I actually have two jumpers which I kept, but I must have knitted 6. I knitted a little cardigan that I copied from Dolce & Gabbana cardigan that I saw in Finland during this trip, and I reproduced it. And of course, you know, she saw it and she said, "Oh my gosh, this is so beautiful!" So she took it. Anyway,
do you share? Is Instagram the best place to see things that you've knitted?
Yeah. You can go on Instagram and see. I mean, they're all the things I knitted that she took. But the funny thing is that, you know, they live in California, in Santa Barbara, so I wonder when they're going to need it now.
Yeah. It was just needed for that trip, really.
Exactly.
Oh,
but it was helpful, very helpful.
Yeah. Have you got anything else, big picture projects coming up? Books, even if they're...
Well, I'm thinking about this, what I was telling you about the budget deficit and knitting. I'm thinking about, you know, I read a book where I explain what is happening in economics and politics through knitting. I'm thinking, and it would be, I think, you know, it would be different. Not only for, well, this is also not a book, the power of knitting is not only for knitters, but just to use something that is so basic, is such an amazing craft, is such a widespread craft, to explain what we should do in order to get out of this situation. So yes, I'm thinking, but I'm not ready yet.
No, I think actually that would be a very useful book to send out into the world.
Yeah. But I have to structure it in a certain way, because I mean, the proposal has to be done in a way that the publisher will understand easily, because this is the problem, is that even with this book, the proposal was done so well that they got it immediately, because otherwise if they don't get it, it's really difficult to explain
it,
because it's such a different approach.
But we need that at this point in time.
Yeah, I know we need that.
Yeah. we need Loretta approach.
Thank you. I'm working on it.
And is there, because I think I have a few favorites, is there a particular fiber that you're drawn to, and is there a reason why, or are you
more into merino? But now I'm doing this mohair cardigan. I should have it here because I there in the end of the room. But I didn't have enough to do only one color. So, oh my gosh, this one came out actually. I have to fix it. But so this is the front.
Oh wow!
But you see, this is it's a sort of mohair, and then these are the sleeves, and
it's gorgeous.
Yeah. So I thought, so I used not to like this, but now, so I wouldn't say that there is. I know you also go through different stages in your life. And I'm at the Moyer stage at the moment. This is
Me too. I don't know why it's something I was so drawn to, but after firstly talking to a few people and realizing some of its properties, it reinforced it. But having spent time with the goats, I feel like the yarn really reflects them. The properties reflect their characteristics, and
this is what I'd like to do. Actually, I would like to learn how to spin, and then get you. I mean, if you have your own goats or sheep, and then you can do it, it would be so. I was in Sweden giving a speech. I remember about this book, and sorry, I just need to. Otherwise, I lose. That's it. I don't know how it came loose, but so I was giving this speech, and there was this woman, this elderly woman, sitting in the first row, and she had this most beautiful, cardigan with this greenish color. I thought, wow, it's so nice. Anyway, so she told me that she had died herself. She had, she lived in the countryside, so she had the sheep. She did everything herself. Wow. I mean, you can see the difference.
That's absolutely
the uniqueness, of all those things.
Yes, that is my biggest dream project. So I've got my big picture that I've been able to come to, which is lovely. But one of my dreams is to see a sheep, shear it, spin it, wear it, and go back to the sheep.
That was amazing.
But one day, and with knitting, you learn patience, and that
patience is the most important thing. So
and that the connection might happen. Like, I didn't think that I'd ever get to see goats, like play with mohair goats in real life, but through this, I have been able to, and couldn't be more grateful, because knitters want to swap and give and share and help. It's so good. I'm pleased. I'm surprised you picked mohair. It's lovely.
I found it at my mother's house, and it was. You can see that. I can't remember what it was, but you can see that it has been knitted and then unraveled. You see? Yeah. And because of that, I thought, oh, how's he gonna look? And then I did the what's the name in English? Is this English cable? The English cable that you do one part, one knit row, and then the next one you do only knit, so that you get in Italian it's called English cable. So
it's lovely.
Yeah, it's nice. Yes.
Amazing. I did note down so many questions, but I don't want to take up too much of your time. But I really am grateful for spending some time.
You can do it again if you want to.
That would be lovely. And even, if you've got ideas, I'm always happy to listen.
No, absolutely. We can talk. That'd be lovely.
Yeah. Thank you ever so much.
Okay, thank you. And we'll talk next week.
That'd be great.
Okay, I'll finish this so I can wear it.
It's almost lunchtime.
It's lunchtime. Okay. All right.
Thank you so much.
We'll talk next week.
And I'll speak to you next week.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.